topic is, discussing the relationship between adult children and their parents. And without further ado, if Sister Merzia, you can get us started. And if anyone has questions, please just post them in the chat. You can even send them to me or Sister Merzia privately. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, it's better if they send it to you because...
okay.
Yeah.
No worries. Okay, so yeah, just send it to me privately or write it in the chat.
Yeah. Can we get Sakina, can you just get a poll of who's in the room? Like, do we have parents, mostly young people? Who's in the room? And if they could actually start with some challenges they're having right now with the lockdown,
Sure,
that would be fantastic.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so give me 1 second. There should be, I don't see the poll feature, but if, I'll get us started with a few questions. So first question, if you can identify whether you're a parent or an adult child or somebody who's just interested in the topic, or number two, what you would like to what would you like to listen to today and hear from Sister Merzia? Is there anything in specific that you want her to discuss? Any challenges that you're facing? That would be great. If you can unmute yourself and start your video and talk to us, that would be really amazing, so we can get a conversation going. However, if you want to, share those challenges privately with me, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So we'll just wait for a few minutes for you guys to post your questions or ask your questions, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, and also if some people could put on, I see we have at least, I think more than 20 people on right now.
Yeah.
If a few people could be brave enough to start their video, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Because, it's really hard to speak to a blank screen.
For sure. So I'm here. So again, if there's
so that's good.
Okay, perfect.
I will be talking
okay, cool.
No one else starts this.
Sounds good. Yeah, so it would actually really be great if some of you could, or if all of you could share your video with us. That way we can really mimic the usual conversations that we have at the mosque and at events like this. So we're actually talking to each other's faces, and it'll make this lockdown a little bit easier and this conversation flow a lot better. So I would really appreciate if some of you could show us your video and, be part of the conversation.
And so the people who have posted, they all seem to be, at least the 3 people who mentioned, they're all parents. So I'm hoping some young people come on as well. I actually tried to convince my daughter to do this with me because, we're in the same situation as many people are. And, but she's, after a full day of work, she does not want to sit in front of Zoom anymore. So...
I can imagine.
Assalamu alaikum, sister. I'm a parent too.
Oh, alaikum salam.
Alaikum salam.
And I have a question. Is this platform is mainly about the difficulties being as a parent, as a Muslim parent in the West, or?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think the challenges of parenting are similar. Wherever we are. And of course, there are also some cultural things that might be, more, I would say, than others. But I would say that a lot of challenges today, especially, the world is a pretty small place. So are you logging in from somewhere far?
Yes, I was just thinking, like, I have 4 kids, like, so, as a parent, we always from age of 21 to 11, 3 girls and 1 boy. Mm-hmm. So, as a mom, I live in Michigan, USA, and I always want them, pray, I want to do myself, and they look at me and they want to do, they follow. But, sometimes if I say something which is not religious, not like something which is related to Islam, they really get more surprised. Like I say, you know what? I watched that drama. Oh, Mom, you watched the drama? And sometimes I wonder, that should I be more, talking to them, watching Pakistani dramas with them, or talking more like normal talk rather than being a mom and, having this gap sometime. I feel that they think this is too, I think they think this is too low for my mom to watch something which we are watching. So I
Wow.
don't know what to do there.
So they hold you in very high regard, it seems.
No, but you know what, at the same time, but I want to be friend with them. I want, because I have daughter who are 21, 16 and 14.
Mhm.
So I want them to open up with me. Like I just want to share something with you. When I was young, my mom was a single mom. My father passed away when I was only 10-year-old, and we were 6 girls. She used to come, and I was in medical college, finally I'm a doctor by profession. She used to come to my room. She opened the room and she said, don't read anymore, come and watch the TV with me, you know come and drink Coke. So that's how she raised me, and I always trust in her, and I always think that she's my friend. But I think I don't have that relationship with my girls.
Hmm.
I think they think I'm just too serious about everything.
And sometimes we are, right, because we are so busy wanting to do the right thing by our children. And this, actually, I've spoken about this recently as well, that what happens is, for some for some of us, for all of us, parenting is a very serious thing, right? The challenge, though, happens that we are so busy doing the duty of parenting that we forget to enjoy our children.
Yeah.
Right. And that actually is a real, it's very sad, right? Because again, in Islam, what we're told is that our spouses and our children, the dua that we pray is that they would be qurrata ayunin for us, right? So that they would be the delight of our eyes. That's a very high standard of a good relationship, right? That is something, it actually means something that brings delight. It's a very joyous kind of thing. But when we are so serious and we are so focused only on the hard work of parenting, sometimes we lose track of the joy. So, what I would suggest is that you actually pay attention to that, and you try, you ask them, so what would, you just like how you are having this conversation with me, actually have it with your children and say, it seems to me that that you consider me to be something like not a normal person, that I'm only your mom, but I'm not a real human being. And I want to change that.
Yeah, that's what I am trying to do during this quarantine. What I'm doing, we have once a week, we have cooking lessons together. So one of them, they make like they're more fun, they more like to make some more food which we usually don't make. Like they want to bake a stuff, they want to make some cookies, brownies. So that's what we are doing together. Thanks to this quarantine, we are making this good time out of it. But that's what I feel, that I think, I've been a little bit more scared of what's going on, and I'm just more cautious about every single thing sometimes.
Okay, so today, hopefully, once we get into the content, hopefully, one of my aims is to actually lighten up a bit because this, this is not the time to be that serious, right? We need to give each other some leeway, right? So inshallah, let's begin. So are there any young people in the house? I would love to hear from you. If there are children, for example, who have come back from university and are living with parents after like being forced to be at home with parents, that's kind of why I wanted to do this, because many people I know are in that situation, right? So they've moved away from home, they were at university, and now they're finding that they're back home, and they have to live under the same roof with no escape. Right. So, having said that, let's begin, and inshallah, hopefully, if if not too many young people are showing up, then at least we can have a conversation with parents, right? So let's begin.
If I can quickly, sorry. Sorry, I just want to quickly make a short announcement. So yeah, if you can identify if you're a younger person or a child, a teenager, that would be great. Number two, like some of you did start joining us on video. That's great. Sister Zainab Somani, thank you, and salam. Sister Masuma K, if you can turn on your video again, that would be great. We loved your background. It's very beautiful. So yeah, please, you're more than welcome to join. However, if you do observe hijab, do know that we have about 35 participants, and we will be having more, and this is open to everyone. So just be mindful of that. And before we get started, I just quickly want to introduce our speaker and just tell you a little bit about who she is, so that you know that you're getting advice from somebody really amazing and somebody who's an expert in the field, so you can trust her suggestions. So we have with us Sister Marzia Hassan. She is an author, a public speaker, and a marriage and family therapist, and she works with individuals, couples, and families. She started her working career as a high-powered corporate lawyer, but after starting her own family, she realized that her true passion was in empowering and strengthening families to create intentional and healthy relationships. After a decade of self and professional study, Sister Marzia now works as a social worker and relationship consultant with individuals, couples, and families. After obtaining her master's in social work, Sister Marzia started Family Connections International. It's a psychotherapy practice based in Toronto as well as online. And since she's lived and experienced life in 3 continents, she combines her Western scientific thought with Eastern spiritual wisdom to bring a unique and practical aspect to her work with families. So we're going to link her some of her work, her website, as well as her books in the comments at the end of the chat. Sister Marzia, we can get started now. The floor is yours.
Good, thank you. So, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. As-salatu was-salamu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma. So, assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome. Thank you, Sakina, for that introduction, that very warm introduction. But today actually I'm here more as a parent like you than any expert, because no matter, here's the thing about this field, that no matter how much you study, and you still have your own challenges, right? So a little bit about my own situation right now. My 3 kids have all left home, in the sense that they're all working away from where I live, which is in Toronto. And my one daughter, who was in New York, she was the only one who basically had to come home, because as you know, New York is in a pretty bad way. And so she's here with me right now, and this is what we are coping with. So when children grow up, when they even if they're just away at university, obviously they get used to making decisions for themselves. And we could talk a lot about what that is and whether or not that's healthy. I have a lot of opinions on it. But when they come back, and in a situation like this, when we're all forced to be in the same place with not knowing how long for, and all of that, obviously it does bring challenges. And so today I thought it's important to have a conversation, and hopefully between the parents and children, that how can we navigate that so that it's not more difficult than it has to be. Okay. And so even when I'm speaking to parents, I'm going to be hopefully asking us, including myself, to look at some of the ways that we behave, which is hard for our children, given that they are grown up, quote unquote. And also I have obviously a lot of things to say to children as well, in how they can help, manage the situation so that it's easier rather than then more difficult, right? So I'm just looking at the chat, and at least some people are watching with their kids, which is fantastic. I'm really happy about that. So let's see. And by the way, it was really hard for me to come up with a title. As some of you know who've heard me before, I actually like to have, once I get a topic and a title, that's how I start thinking. And this was very challenging. I think it's because we're all going through it and we don't really have a blueprint. We don't normally I would consult books, I would consult, the literature to see what research says. And you can't do any of that because it's such a new situation, right? So anyway, having said that, so let's start by talking about what are some of the challenges and then some of the opportunities as well of the lockdown. And then we'll talk a little bit about, what the parents' role is, what the youth role is in all of this, and, what are just some principles of strong family relationships that can help us navigate this time, right? And by the way, the title that I did come up with was How to Survive the Too Much Togetherness of Family Life during the pandemic, right? And basically how to maintain your sanity during the lockdown. And it's very interesting because I know in my house, and I think we're pretty well adjusted grown human beings, but we're also, given the work that we do, we are pretty in touch with our emotions, I would say, right? And I know that we are having a hard time coping, not in, relationships, alhamdulillah, family life is okay, but just the whole the world, right? It is impacting us. And so when I speak to some people and they say, oh, alhamdulillah, we are having such a good time, I wonder, is it only us who's having a hard time navigating it? But I know that that's probably not true, right? So it's a good idea to at least be a little bit honest about it so that we can have, a good conversation. And so let's talk about what the reality is right now. There has been a lot of change very fast. And we know that when things change, it takes people a little while to adjust to the new reality, right? And because it has been so fast and so extreme, obviously we are still all finding our way, right? Can you please ask her to go into slideshow mode? How do I do that? Okay, the thing is that okay, let me try. Is that better?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
So
there's a lot of uncertainty as well, right? Now, so change is one thing. On top of that, there's uncertainty. There is displacement. What I mean by displacement is that, for example, all the universities have closed, right? So children who were in the dorms, who were in residence are now back home. And even though they may have just gone away for school, it's a very different kind. Like, for example, when my daughter came, she's like, this is her home. She grew up here, she's comfortable here, but all her stuff is still in New York. Like she said, I had to pack literally in 2 hours, and, she's working, so she has to dress up for work every day, but she's wearing the same 2 pairs of clothes that she came. And there's no, she says, what, am I supposed to just zip up to Yorkdale to go shopping? No, that's not possible, right? So there's a lot of displacement. And, when something like this happens, when we're all, when we're in trouble or when we're under stress, how do we gain comfort and solace is that we connect to loved ones, right? We hang out with people. And obviously, on top of all of this, we can't do that. That's probably the greatest stressor of this pandemic is the distance from loved ones, right? And for those of us, who have like older parents or people who are on the front lines, in different parts of the world who we can't see, obviously that's a lot of stress added to it, right? Also, who do we, if you're having a bad day, generally you call a friend and you vent, you talk to them and you feel better. In a situation like this, when everyone is going through the same thing, that option is also less available, right? And we can talk about it. And those of you who follow my blog every day, in fact, I've been writing about that, right? How to be there for each other, you know. So for example, if somebody's having a really bad day and the other ones are not so, you know, they're a little bit better that day, then, you know, it's a thing of offering support and accepting support, right? But also, you know, on top of all of this, you are living in very close quarters. So generally, you know, in family life, there's a balance of being alone time, together time, and work time, right? Now, all of this is in the same place and very little boundaries. So many people don't have the luxury of having a home office or having a space where they can go to. So they're forcing, you know, they're being forced to share the same space. Or if they're working in their bedroom, then can you imagine working in the bedroom, sleeping in the bedroom? It's a lot, right? So, you know, all of these things are adding to the stress. And it's no wonder, you know, if people are struggling with mental health or with, you know, being moody or being, you know, just being on edge, irritable, all of these things to an extent, you know, that is to be expected. And you know, one of the messages of today is going to be that we need to, you know, this is not the time to be harsh on each other. Like, we need to deal with each other with a lot of grace. Like, you know, I was talking to someone and they were talking about all the healthy food they're cooking these days, right? And I said, you know, in our house, we have a very clear rule these days. We need comfort food. You know, life is hard enough as it is, then making it harder. So whatever is going to make it easier for us, we're going to do that, right? So every day we make sure that, like, we're eating like a lot of comfort food, and it's not going to be the end of the world. You know, obviously there's a balance, and, you know, inshallah Ramadan is coming, so we will adjust. But again, this is probably not the time to have such high standards that it is causing more distress in the family, is what I'm trying to say. What else? So however, there is some good news. There are some opportunities as well. And that everyone is on the same playing field, right? It's happening to everyone. So, you know, what this means for people who are, for example, you know, stressed about work or stressed about university, especially the students, right? A lot of students are extremely stressed about academics, you know, what's going to happen, whether they're going to have a job at the end of it. And, you know, all I can suggest is that everyone's in the same boat. And if we can come out of this with our relationships intact, with our mental health okay, with our spiritual well-being okay, then everything else, inshallah, will work out, right? So at this point, that's what we need to prioritize. We need to prioritize that as a family unit, we are still functioning okay, that we are not on each other's throats, that we are not, you know, because reality is, and this is not something that people like to talk about, but reality is that relationships that are already in distress are going to have a very hard time, because in terms of all the distress that's already there, now you have all of these added stressors, right? So that's why we need to make it as easy as possible so that the people can actually come out of it somewhat whole. You know what I mean? And we also have the idea that we still have the ability, alhamdulillah, to keep in touch, right? I keep thinking, you know, had this happened in days when there were no cell phones, when there was no internet, it would have been that much harder, right? Also, the opportunity in that is that, at least I'm finding that, you know, when we get together on Zoom as a family, and when we're talking, it's much more real conversation. You know, so when you're hanging out with someone in the same space, you tend to, like, people tend to be on their phones, or, you know, we're not present, right? But at least this is what I'm finding, that when we are having conversations on video or whatever, because I think we're all needing that connection so much, that we are more present and we are more available emotionally for the other person, right? And that's something to keep in mind, that if we, you know, whichever way we're connecting, that's what's going to really help us, is keeping those emotional bonds going, right? So alhamdulillah, we have virtual communities, and what's amazing is how quickly people have adapted to moving their life online, right? So the spiritual thing, the learning is going on, all of that is happening just on a different platform, right? And one of the biggest opportunities in this time, during this time, is to literally prioritize, to recognize what we can do without, to recognize what is important. Like when I go around, then one of the ways where I cope, and this is my own personal like mental health habit, is I like to declutter and clean up. Like if I'm really distressed, I like to clean closets and reorganize, and it gives me some sort of, it's therapeutic for me, right? And when I see something, I say, oh, I probably could do with another container, or maybe this mat needs to be changed. And I was like, you know what, it's not going to happen for months. Like, who knows when I'm going to be able to do that. And then you realize that, what, it really doesn't matter. So you learn to really focus on all the things that you can do without, and what really matters. And again, it's a very raw but a very real time. I don't know if people get what I'm trying to say, right? That when people are under distress and everyone's in the same situation, and the world has changed, like there's no doubt that normal is going to be a very different normal, right? Just as 9/11 was a defining point in the history of the world. So there is the world before that and the world after that, right? This pandemic is exactly the same. And hopefully the new normal will be of more enlightenment, right? More conscious living, more recognizing of what's really important in life. So it is a real opportunity. So now let's talk about parenting adult children, right? So just as it's hard for children, and it is really hard for them to come under, our 24/7 supervision, again, it is also very challenging for parents, right? And one of the things to start with is to recognize, and that's why I said older children, right? What do I mean by older children? So for those of you who've heard me before, have heard me talk about what I call the Islamic parenting contract, right? What I mean by that is that we know that in Islam, we have a very clear kind of, and I like to think of literally as a contract for 21 years. So, we are responsible for the child for 21 years. That's the time period we have. The first 7 years we spend building bonds with them. The second 7 years, from 7 to 14, we spend training them, disciplining them, teaching them life skills. And then from the age of 14 to 21, they expand their horizons, they try out what we've learned. And, the idea is that by the age of 21, our hands-on active parenting should have been completed, right? Because the stages are in those 7 years. Now, as the child grows, obviously, and our responsibility changes, so does our role. So, when the child is very young, obviously, we are very much hands-on. We have complete control of their environment. We feed them, we tell them what to wear. In the second 7 years, we're disciplining them, training them. And what I'm saying is that gradually, the strings of control and supervision should loosen. That's the normal state of parenting and raising adults, right? We always talk about raising children, but actually what we're trying to do is we're trying to raise adults. So the idea is that by the time they leave home, and even if they choose to stay at home, that's a different thing. But by the age of 21, a child should no longer be a child. They should be able to navigate life on their own, right? That's the goal. And the idea is that, when we are dealing with another adult, which is, what they are at the age of 21, we cannot treat them the way we were when they were 14. It's not going to work. It will cause conflict. It will cause. So this means that we as parents really need to ask ourselves, is that what we're doing? Are we dealing with our children as adults, or are we dealing, what do I mean by that? So for example, I'll give you, my own examples. Of course, not proud of these things, by the way, but it just shows that we do it. And what we can do is to take responsibility for it. So here's the thing. So, like I like order around me as much as I don't believe that I'm that, OCD about it, but I do like some sort of order. And like when I'm done laundry, I like the laundry room to be clean at least for 2-3 days, right? But another adult, and this is what my daughter told me, that an adult should be able to decide when they do laundry, right? It's not that they should do laundry according to my agenda, right? And it makes sense. Like I can't argue with that, because it makes absolute sense that yes, it's a desire. I like to have the counters clean, everything clean. But at the end of it, it's a laundry room, right? And at the end of it, if somebody was to tell me, being a grown up, no, you need to do laundry on Tuesdays. Why? Because I like a clean laundry room. It would seem a bit weird, right? But what I'm saying is that as parents, we do that to our children, even grown children. We tell them, what to wear, for example, when we're going out with them. That doesn't happen anymore. But like when you go to the mosque or something, we tell our grown children what to wear, how, you see what I'm saying, right? That when we are dealing with adults, we need to treat them as adults. So another point here is, of us self-awareness as parents, right? What is it like to be in a relationship with ourselves? This is a question that really we need to ask ourselves, and be quite brave and courageous to listen to the answer, right? How do we show love? How do I manage conflict? So for example, if I'm upset with someone, do I use emotional blackmail? Do I scream and shout? Do I withdraw emotionally? And all of these things, by the way, are not healthy behaviors, right? And when we are dealing with other adults, or even with children, they're not healthy behaviors. But again, when we are dealing with another adult, we have to ask ourselves that, is this how we would deal with another friend, right? Would we, if we were dealing with a friend like this, would we think that that was okay, right? I'm going to stop for a second to see if there's any questions or comments. And Sakina, if there are any questions, you will ask them, yeah?
Yeah. If I do get any questions privately, I'll mention them here. You're more than welcome to unmute yourself and share a question or a comment, or if you'd like, you can even write it in the chat to all of us or to me privately. Do we have any teenagers, anybody who's kind of experiencing what Sister Marzia is talking about? Okay, we have one question. How do you deal with difficult parents?
Okay, so can you expand what that means? What do you mean by difficult?
Yeah, so Sister Siddiqa, if you could expand on that.
Sure, I'll just do it now.
Yeah. You're more than welcome to, just unmute yourself if you'd like as well. Don't have to share your video.
Okay.
Assalamualaikum. Just ask the question.
Assalamualaikum, sisters.
Alaikum salam.
Okay. So my question is, I often deal with teenagers. They often ask me, how do you deal with difficult parents? Meaning they have like an age gap difference, so they don't have that connection. So that's what I meant by difficult parents, like age gap difference. So sometimes they like to do certain things and parents say like, oh, you shouldn't do that. You should be doing this. So, I mean, that's the question that I'm referring to.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good question. And when we come to, that's about more like speaking up, right? So what you want. And the idea is that, for both for parents and for children, I think it's important to learn how to speak up and to ask for what you want, and how to complain, right? How to complain means that something's not working, and how do we remedy this? Because very often we start criticizing, we start blaming, and those things don't work, right? But there are alternatives. So just hang on to that question. It's a really good one, and inshallah we will come to it, right?
Sure, thank you.
So again, talking about changing roles, right? So, when the children are very young, obviously we are a supervisor more than anything else, right? They need to be supervised. And then when we are training them, when we are disciplining them from the age of 7 to 14, we are basically a trainer. We're there to teach them life skills, to discipline them. And what I mean by discipline is not punishment. I mean, just train them in life skills, right? And as they grow, the idea is that we need to become a coach and a consultant. A coach and a consultant means that we can't really tell them what to do, because as grown-ups, one of the things about adulthood is that you get to make your own decisions, right? So, we can be a coach, we can be a consultant, and the idea is that the more we focused on our relationship with them, the greater chance that we have of leverage in their decisions. So, for example, if we have a really close, respectful relationship where there is mutual love, mutual respect, they are much more likely to value us, to want to hear us out, to want to come to us with questions, and all of these things, right? But if the relationship is one of stress, of domination, of control, they will, run away as much as possible, right? One of the things that we need to, obviously when you're living together with someone, there is, we need to expect that there will be conflict. What I mean by conflict is that your needs might conflict with my needs, and my desires. For example, if I like a clean space and you're okay with mess, that kind of thing. And that's normal. That is not, if you have conflict in the family, if you have differences of opinion, if you have different ways of doing things, that does not mean your family is unhealthy. It actually, we expect that in every family there will be different preferences, there will be different ways of doing things, and all of that is normal, right? So the question is to ask ourselves as parents is that whose problem is it and whose responsibility is it, right? So for example, let's take the laundry example again, right? Whose problem is it to do laundry? Not mine, right? If you're a grown-up and you are doing your own laundry, then great. And it is your responsibility just to get it done. And however you choose to do that, another adult would be, normally should be okay with that, right? So who needs to take action, right? Now there are some people, for example, some parents who say, so like in our house, obviously, housework has really increased, with everyone being home. And people eating a lot more, right? Just because 3 meals at home, all of that. So most people are sharing the fact that there's a lot more housework. Now, how that housework is divided needs to be a sort of a democratic, it needs to be shared equitably, if one person, but at the same time. So for example, again, if in my family, I would like help, right? If I would like help in the kitchen, for example, with cleanup, with meal preparation, or with whatever, the other side of that is that I also need to be a little bit more open to the idea that people have their own way of doing things. I can certainly, I can request it, I can teach them how to do it, but at the end of the day, if an adult says, I will clean up the kitchen, I have 2 options. Either I say, no, I like it done this way, so I will do it. Or I can say, you know what, yes, I need the kitchen clean. How you do it is up to you. Does that make sense? So, so those kinds of things obviously are causing quite a bit of friction right now. The other thing is closeness and distance and boundaries. So for example, if people are working in a space, obviously there are, nobody's going away. People are working, most of people are working from home. And if people are working from home, especially, my generation of parents finds it quite challenging to accept that my child can be working and they're not to be disturbed, because it's serious, right? Now, if I keep going in the room and saying, oh, can you help me with this? Or, let's do this, or let's have a cup of tea or whatever. The idea is that we need to respect the fact that there are boundaries. Just like that, if I'm working from home, or if I'm, taking some time for myself or whatever, just because everyone's home does not automatically assume that they're welcome to barge in anytime they feel like it as well, right? So in order to make this work long term, we will need to have conversations about that, right? That how much, how much closeness, how much distance, what kind of boundaries. So boundaries, even, if you have space, obviously that's fantastic, right? If you can actually set boundaries by, what, I'm in the living room, you're in the dining room, and you're in the basement, right? However, not everyone has that kind of luxury. And if you don't, then you make boundaries, any which way you can, like have a sign, I'm working right now, have, put on headphones or put on earplugs, just so that people know that you're not available, that you are actually engaged in some other activity, and it's not a time to just hang out. And I think, when this first started, it's probably becoming better now, but when it first started, people were, much more trying to still find their footing, right? But I think as time is going on, people are getting better at, at setting these boundaries. Another thing that comes up is spaces. So who is going to be, so for example, if somebody, when we're living in a home, it's okay to expect and to request that at least the public spaces, the shared spaces be kept so that it works for everyone, right? So if I have a need for order and someone in my family doesn't, but it's a shared space, then we need to have that conversation and see what works for both people. However, in their private spaces, especially as adult children, I can't really demand that they clean up their rooms that like they used to when they were 10 and 14. I can't do that, because at the end of it, they are adults. I can certainly recommend it, I can request it, but I can't go into, I can't use emotional blackmail or threats or criticism or any of those things, right? So again, coaching skills, what does it mean to be a coach and a consultant, right? The idea is that we can share our reactions, we can share what we believe, but we cannot demand that it's only our way. We cannot demand that we are listened to and obeyed in every situation, right? Especially for things which are not consequential in terms of values and in terms of, you know what I mean, right? So they're not, like if my child said, I want to vape at home or I want to smoke at home, I can say, no, you're not allowed to do that. But if they say, I want to bake brownies at midnight, I probably have to say, okay, like it's not probably a wise thing to do, to have so much sugar in the middle of the night. But at the end of it, you are, you are a grown up and you should be able to make a decision about what you're going to eat and at what time, right? So, now talking to kids. So I hope that they're still around. And, one thing that we also need to put on the table, right? Very often when I'm doing, when I'm speaking and both generations are in the room, very often I will see people nudging the other one, right? And my concern is always that people will go home and they will use what they learned to tell the other person off. That, see, Marzia auntie said this. And so right off the bat, I should have started with that, but honestly, you're not allowed to do that. because that's not a good use of your learning. One of the main things that we will talk about when we come to, how we can improve family life is that we need to focus on ourselves. We cannot wait for other people to change. So if I'm a parent, I need to start as a parent. And if I'm a young person, I need to start as a young person. Okay. So having said that, let's talk to the kids now, hoping that they are, still here. So, one of the things that youth want most is to be treated like an adult, to be trusted, to be not to be told what to do all the time, not to be told how to do things. And my biggest piece of advice for this is, if you want freedom, if you want trust, you need to take responsibility. You cannot have it both ways. So if you are living with your parents and you want the freedom, you want the respect, you want to be treated as equal, you need to take, you need to pick up some slack. Like, you need to step up to the responsibility. And when that happens, automatically you will gain more respect. Okay. So freedom and responsibility are completely intertwined. Sometimes what happens with youth is that, for example, if a parent sees that a child is sleeping till noon, is not eating, is not changing, is not showering, and then they're saying, why are you telling me what to do? It doesn't work, because it's very anxiety provoking for a parent to see a child making poor decisions about their life. And if you say, for example, if you were in the working environment, right, you wouldn't be able to do that. You would have to wake up, you'd have to, be on time, and you'd have to take responsibility for your own life, right? So one of the best ways to negotiate your relationship with your parents is to demonstrate all of this, right? To demonstrate responsibility, to demonstrate that you are worthy of, that you are capable of being trusted, okay? And, one of the other things that we need to recognize is, and this, by the way, I asked my daughter, I said, what, because she actually works with youth, and I said, what do you see amongst the young people? And, what is the greatest source of stress in relationships? And she actually said that, young people tend to see their parents just as their parents. They don't see that they are actually other human beings who are also imperfect, trying their best, having their own set of worries, having all of these things, and they need to be cut some slack too. So just like you have had a lot of displacement in your life, and you are worried perhaps about the economy, about your work, about university, all of these things, parents have their own set of worries, and in addition, everything that impacts you impacts them more, right? And this you only recognize, I guess, when you become a parent, that it's, I always think of it as having your heart walk outside your body. That's the experience of being a parent, right? That when a child is distressed, or they're not able to, they're finding it challenging, it does impact parents. Now, whether it should or shouldn't, the idea is that instead of saying it shouldn't, if we cut them some slack, right? If we have some grace, some compassion towards them, it's much more likely that they will, that the relationship will improve, right? And that's why I've put there gratitude, grace, and compassion. And by the way, it's very interesting that when you look at our faith, there is so much emphasis put on showing this kind of grace and compassion to your parents, right? And the reason for that, again, is that it's hard. As a young person, it is hard to be told what to do, to be asked questions, and all of that, right? But sometimes what happens is that it becomes, the more parents ask, the more children tend to withdraw or not share, right? And it goes the other way too. So for example, if, and this is really like now, obviously no one's leaving the house, but if, for example, if you are leaving the house, I hear children say all the time that, oh, I'm 26 years old or I'm 24 years old and I can stay out late if I want to. And why do I have to tell you where I'm going? And the way I, explain to the youth and to the parents both is that it's not about power and it's not about control. If your parents were to leave and go somewhere and not tell you where they were and not show up till 2 a.m, if you really loved and cared for them, you would be worried. And it's not a question, they're grown-ups, they're used to living their life. It's a thing about being related and loving someone and having their best interest at heart, right? That's what being a family means. So again, try to reframe their concern, not as the fact that you are incapable or that you don't have enough ability, but simply that they are concerned. And the way to deal with that, for example, is just communicate. So if you're going somewhere, if something's going on with you, right? If something's stressing you out, if you communicate that rather than just withdrawing, your relationship will greatly improve and their level of stress and anxiety will also be much less, right? So, and I'll ask you, the youth, the same question that I asked the adults, which is, what is it like to be in a relationship with you? If you were the parent and you had a child like you, would you be okay with that? And how do you show love? How do you show love to your parents? This is very important because you need to. They show their love in many different ways. And sometimes it becomes only a one-way street, right? So if there is conflict between the youth and the parent, so the parent will be chasing, and the youth will be withdrawing, right? But if you are an adult and you want to have an adult relationship, then you need to have some responsibility for demonstrating gratitude for everything that they do for you, right? For demonstrating appreciation, not to take it all for granted. So if someone is still cooking for you, cleaning even the spaces in the house, you can't take that for granted as an adult. If I'm an adult, no one comes and does that for me. I have to do it for myself, right? So if someone is doing that for me as an adult, the least I can do is show responsibility for that, show appreciation and gratitude for that, right? So, and again, if I, make it a point to demonstrate my love for my parents in the ways that they want or in the ways that I know how, then obviously my relationship will be better, right? And this is literally, like I said, a glimpse at adulting. This is what adult relationships and adult families look like, right? So what are some of the very basic minimal things that that youth need to take responsibility for if we are going to live in the same house and have some a harmonious relationship, right? So again, saying thank you, saying, like in our house, we just, it's really weird, but we say thank you to each other for things that we do every single day. Because, and it, when you are thanked for something that you would do anyway, like I would cook for my family whether or not they say thank you. But when they say thank you to me, it greatly increases my level of motivation to do more. It increases my gratitude for them. And it creates a lot of love in my heart for them, right? And it doesn't cost anything. It actually doesn't cost anything, right? So not only obviously as an adult, you need to take responsibility for keeping your own space in order, your own things in order, but also if you are part of a family and if you are wanting to be, to have a relationship as adults, then you need to, do a little bit more than just do your own thing, right? So a shared space should be a shared, shared job, in the sense that, and I know that parents sometimes want things done their own way, and you say fine, just do it your way, but again, the idea is that all of us, parents and children, we can both do a little bit more than what we're doing now. Okay. So questions, comments, how are we doing on time?
We're doing okay. We do have time for questions. So if anybody has any questions regarding everything that was discussed until now, that would be great. I know a lot of you are asking privately if this is recorded. Yes, this is recorded. We will share, we usually share, what I will do is I'm going to write down an email address in the chat, and if you want the recording, just email this email address and they will send you the recording. It should be ready in the next day or so.
Or
yes, it's info@dua. Say that again.
Yeah, actually that's probably better. I was just saying I could probably put it as a download on my website, but it might be a huge file.
Yeah, so we will share it with Sister Marzia, and we can also email it to you if you just send us an email in that group. So this is actually an event by Let's Connect. It brings international students, everybody together. These sessions are open for everybody, youth, parents, people of all ages, obviously. And, just making the best of the quarantine. That's what the series is called. So yeah, if you want to access the recording, just send an email to that email address and they'll send you the recording. So questions. Does anyone have any questions or comments they would like to share until, what's been discussed until now? That would be great, so we can get a conversation going. Are there any, students or, children as an audience today that could kind of give us some feedback? Anyone? I think perhaps I can, represent the students or the children. My parents are, back home I'm from Tanzania, so they're back home. But there's definitely, it can be very difficult to, having lived. So I went to college and then I spent 4 years away from home, and then I came back. Went back to Tanzania, to Dar es Salaam, and then I stayed there for about a year and a half before I moved back. And I remember my mom saying, she's like, you just want space. You just want space. It seems like you just need space. You keep asking for space. Why? Now though, with my younger sister, who also went back for Ramadan last year, and she was having a really hard time adjusting, but she didn't realize what was happening. And she was like, I don't know, the mosque doesn't seem the same way, I seem to be getting annoyed. And my mom's like, you need space. And so I was like, okay, great. So it's fine. I guess I'm, the tester child, which is okay. But, I think a lot of times when you do communicate, which I think I tried, parents do listen, and sometimes you just need to speak in their language and just let them know, hey, like, this is bothering me, or, this is really something, like, I need to talk to you about this, like, and please don't judge me, and please don't get mad, but I need to tell you this, right? Maybe sometimes we need to, like, start off with that. That sometimes does help.
Exactly. I think that's a really good point. Exactly that, instead, if you are having conflict, just by shutting down or being resentful, or it doesn't work, right? But when you do actually speak up that, listen, this is what, and it may be hard for the parents to hear. So just like it's hard for children to go back, it's also hard for parents when children come back, right? Because when we sent them, they were still children. And when they come back, they're adults. Yeah. So obviously it takes time for parents as well to adjust to this new person, right? And also to let go. But the more you speak up, actually, and the more you speak up as an adult, obviously the parents also realize that, yeah, this is an adult that I'm speaking to, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree with that. You know, another thing is sometimes I think with our cultures, it's quite difficult for parents to even start this chain of communication, or sometimes they might find it very uncomfortable to even like talk openly with you, even if, you know, you're willing to. And I think with that, what's at least helped me and some of, you know, my other friends as well, is kind of doing it in small doses and, you know, starting to share you know, bits and pieces about your thoughts and your dreams and your ideas, and then slowly really getting into things that you know, bother you, about, say, like your relationship with them, or, you know, just relationships in general, or then asking them for advice. I think then they start looking at you more as you know, a friend and an equal. And I've noticed that then, you know, sometimes they come, you know, to you with questions and concerns and advice as well. So
yeah, for sure. And I think that's really the beauty of you know, if you can navigate that relationship and learn to deal with each other as adults. Obviously no one else knows you better. You know, no one else knows you better than your parents, and no one else knows you better than your children, right? So it can be a very deep and meaningful relationship. And if we are brave enough, and it does take bravery, it does take courage to both speak up and to listen, you know, to listen in that way. Okay. So, you know, let's talk a little bit now about just what is the basics of relationships, right? What are the basics of family relationships? How can both, you know, all members of the family work to build this? So, you know, the first thing is to, again, focus on yourself. You know, when we are focused on the other person, we are completely powerless, right? Because we can't change them, we can't control them. We have no power, especially as adults, you know, when we're dealing with another adult, even with children, but with adults especially, we can't. And the more, you know, parents sometimes think if they feel powerless, which parents often do if children are not listening to them, they tend to lose control, right? And, you know, they may say things and do things which are not according to their own values. And when that happens, you know, one of the things that we parents and children, both of us, right, we all need to recognize that you cannot be in charge of anyone if you're not in control of yourself. So, and you can't even be in charge or in control of your relationship if you can't manage yourself. So even if you're upset, you know, it's perfect. All emotions are normal, they're natural. It's normal to get angry sometimes at people. It's normal to get upset, to be resentful, to be jealous. You know, all of these things are human emotions and they come and go, right? The difference though is that we do not need to act on every emotion that we feel. So if we feel angry, right, there are many different ways of dealing with our own anger rather than unleashing it on the person who's in front of us, right? So the difference between a toddler, for example, a toddler, if they get angry, they say, what do they say? Like if you go into a room and two toddlers are fighting, they will point to the other one and say, they did it, right? So they blame. You know, one of the biggest things is that they blame, they take no responsibility, and they deny. So if they said, you know, who broke the vase? They said, not me. You know, he did it, or she did it, or the boogeyman did it, or whoever did it, right? that's childlike behavior, that's toddler behavior. As grown-ups, when we become adults, when we become mature, we are able to take charge of our own. We're able to be responsible for our behavior. So even if we make a mistake, and we will, it doesn't mean no matter how much you may lose it sometimes. But a mature, an adult person does what? They're able to repair. They're able to apologize. They're able to take responsibility and not blame somebody else. Like, you made me do it is the sign of a toddler, not an adult, because no one really has control over our behavior. Yes, people can, do what they do, and we can get upset and emotional at their behavior. But how we act on that emotion is always up to us, right? So, and that's what I mean by being reactive and proactive. So if somebody does something to me, say my 18-year-old daughter bangs the door. I say something to her, she gets angry, she slams the door and she walks out, okay? So that's what happens. That's the stimulus. Now, how I respond to that, sometimes I think, okay, if she does that, then obviously I'm going to get angry. Obviously I'm going to lose my temper. Obviously I'm going to scream, right? But it's really not that obvious. Her behavior and your behavior is not joined together, right? There is actually, as human beings, we have the ability to pause. We have the ability to choose our response, right? That is what is meant by being responsible. Response able, ability able to respond, right? So we cannot say that you made me get angry because you banged the door. No, you banged the door, which was not a good thing. It was not an action which I validate or accept, and I still have a choice on how I'm going to respond. So if you do something, and this is what I mean by unilateral virtue, right? Unilateral virtue means you can do whatever, but my behavior is controlled by my values and not by your behavior, right? So even if you raise your voice, I still have the choice. I still have the choice not to raise my voice, right? That is unilateral virtue. That means that I am working from my set of values and not as a reaction to your behavior, okay? That's what being an adult means. And the last point I have here is emotional bank account, right? Emotional bank account means that between two people, between any two people, we always have a feeling of goodwill or trust. And one of the ways to conceptualize that is that it's almost like there's an emotional bank account between the two of us. So if you do something which makes me happy, which is kind, which is appreciative, that's like a deposit in the bank account. And when you do something which is which I don't like, if you lie to me, if you break my trust, if you are rude, all of those things, that's like a withdrawal from the bank account, right? So the idea is that sometimes we think, okay, my relationship is so messed up, where do I begin? How do I begin to repair, or how do I get back on track? And, a great way of thinking about this is, don't think about the whole relationship. Just think about the next interaction. So every time you meet somebody, if you just focus on that interaction and make that interaction a positive one, it is like you are putting money in your bank account all the time. And the healthier your emotional bank account will be, the more it's able to withstand times when you are not at your best. And so if you have a very healthy bank balance between you, then you can cut each other some slack. If you're having an off day, it's much easier to be compassionate, to let it go, because we have a really good bank account, emotional bank balance, right? But if that's really overdrawn, if we're continuously fighting, we're getting irritated at little things, when that bank balance is running really low, then every little thing will seem a bigger thing. Every little thing will be annoying to us, right? It's a really excellent way of actually conceptualizing what is going on and how to amend it, right? So, the idea is very simple. It just simply means that you make deposits by building on positive moments, and these savings, these emotional savings, will be a cushion when times get rough, which they will. In every relationship, there will be times when you're not at your best, right? So again, think of it as a small moment, a small interaction, a small positive thing. So, one of the quickest ways of building a bank account is, again, appreciation. Start by saying thank you for things that you take for granted. And the more you do that, you can, it's a really, like I call it the 60-second secret to turning around any relationship, really. The more we start focusing on what the person is doing right, the more our attention goes to that, and the more, feeling of goodwill rises in between that, right? And, obviously, we, at the same time that we're building the bank account, we also need to focus on the fact that we minimize withdrawals, right? So withdrawals means that anything which is a negative interaction, criticism, defensiveness. So if you've done something wrong, instead of taking responsibility, you blame the other person, or you make excuses. That's defensiveness. Contempt, like you look down on somebody. You have, invalidation. So for example, if somebody's having a really hard day, you tell them something like, oh, that doesn't, why are you making such a big deal? It's really not such a big deal, right? Things like that. And another one, which is stonewalling, which some parents are pretty good at, including me. So all of us, we have a go-to behavior when we are in conflict. So some of us scream, some of us withdraw, some of us become really silent, right? And the idea is, again, that if we are aware of it, so I'm aware that, when I get stressed, it's hard for me to speak up. And I become really silent, and the other person can really interpret that as stonewalling, as withdrawing, as not speaking, and it's very difficult to cope with that, right? So if I'm aware of that, I can at least have an honest conversation, right? That yes, I know I do this. I'm sorry about it. I'm trying to work at it, right? If we simply stop blaming the other person and take responsibility and acknowledge that, what, I understand that this is my go-to thing, that if I'm stressed, maybe I start screaming, right? And I don't mean to, and I don't know what happens. And, can we come up with a way that you can support me in not doing that? So if I'm about to do that, for example, give me a signal, say, mom, you're already doing that, or daughter, like, just watch it, you're going there. So, now what we're doing is we're both on the same page rather than blaming each other for causing that. Does that make sense? And, one of the biggest things that we can do to, maintain our relationships is learn to complain effectively. So what do I mean by that? So, this is about speaking up. So if something is bothering you, it doesn't mean that you just ignore it or you blame the other person or whatever, right? You can actually ask for what you want. And for parents, this can be quite challenging. So for example, if I find myself alone in the kitchen every night, cleaning up after, everyone else is watching TV, I've finished cooking, everyone's eaten, and now they've all left and I'm in the kitchen still cleaning up. If I'm feeling resentful about that, I have many ways of doing this ineffectively. I could say, nobody ever helps me around the house, or, why are you guys so selfish? What's going on? I'm the person who everyone takes for granted in this place. You know what I mean? So there's many ineffective ways of doing that. None of these, by the way, is giving a clear message to the people you're living with on what you really want. Basically, we're just giving a lot of negative messages, but no positive direction on what I really want. complaining effectively means that you actually be very specific and share what you really do want to see different. So for example, and it's a formula, right? It's a formula which says when you do X in situation Y, I feel Z. So could you do A instead? So let's take this example of the kitchen, for example, right? So when you do X, when we finish dinner and you leave in situation Y, all of you leave the kitchen, I feel that I'm completely being taken, that I feel alone, I feel unsupported, I feel taken advantage of, and could you please help me, clean up before, so that we can all go and watch TV together. You see how clear that is, right? It's not blaming anybody else. It is saying that when this happens, this is how it makes me feel. And instead, for example, if you do this, it would really help me. Is it hard to speak like this? Initially, yes. Because if you're used to just blaming and being passive aggressive or shutting down, all of these things, this kind of change will take some time, and it will take some courage, right? So when you're first speaking up, you might actually feel a lot of anxiety and heart beating fast and all of that, right? Which is all fine. The idea is that, you have nothing but, togetherness right now. So what better time? And when we complain in this way, it actually gets, so is it a guarantee, by the way? So let's answer this question because it comes up all the time, right? That I did all of this and still no one helped me. Okay, that's a possibility, right? And so the idea is that there's this guarantee that they are going to help you. No, it actually is not a guarantee, right? What it does do, though, is that it does not destroy the relationship further. Because in the other place, you're still not getting help, but what is happening is that you're resentful, they're resentful, no one really knows what you want, right? But when you do it in this way, like this is just one of the things, right? When you do it in this way, it's more likely that people will step up. And, even if they're still resistant to speaking up, at least you know that they will not feel blamed and, accused of causing your distress, right? So I think we've been talking about that. So again, the idea is, what do you really want? If we don't know what we really want, it's really hard to have other people know what we really want, right? And so all of us have lots of expectations of others, and we have a whole set of unwritten rules. Now we have these unwritten rules, but our family didn't get the memo. So let me tell you this by an example. Okay, when I first learned this concept of these unwritten rules, it was a real eye opener for me, right? So, when my kids were young, I used to, with all of the things that I had heard, from lectures and from, I was clear that when parents did something, or when children did something for their parents, they got a lot of benefit, right? It pleased God and all of that. So what I couldn't understand was that if I was asking my children to do something for me, in my head, my unwritten rule was that they should be grateful. They should be grateful for the opportunity to serve me. This was my unwritten rule, right? Now, when I talk about it now, it feels so ridiculous that, it's one thing that, if I ask somebody to make me a cup of tea and they do it, but that wasn't good enough for me. I actually expected that they would jump for joy and they would say, "Thank you, Mama, for the opportunity to serve you." Now, the thing is, it never happened. That never happened, that they were so excited to make me a cup of tea. And every time that they didn't show excitement, I would give them a mental ticket. I would, right? I would write out a mental ticket in my head and say, you know what, these are not very grateful children. And so you can imagine that, it did not help our relationship, right? When we recognize that I have all of these unwritten rules and expectations of other people, it, hopefully the idea is not to make ourselves wrong. We can do it with a sense of humor because we're all human. And, this is what we do, right? This is what human beings do. We're just really silly sometimes. We have these set of expectations and unwritten rules, and we give mental tickets to people. Like these days, I find myself, when I'm out in the grocery store and people are not wearing a mask, I will give them a mental ticket, right? They don't know it, but in my head, I'm giving everyone mental tickets. Now, do they care? No. But this is what we do. And when we're doing it with family, it can really cause issues, right? So I really recommend that all of us, we take a little look at all of these mental tickets that we're giving out, right? And what it is, how is that affecting our relationships? So again, the idea is that adult relationships are one of mutual respect and boundaries. And when we treat each other as we would, what we call the stranger standard, that's the minimum, right? That if we are really kind and polite to outsiders, we should have at least, at the minimum, that level of respect and kindness for the people who matter most in our lives, right? And when we do that, when we bring the stranger standard inside our homes, that's when we truly have, satisfying adult relationships, right? How are we doing with time? I think we're almost at the end. I think let's leave the managing conflict for another time because it's a lot. We spoke about a lot of different things. And if people have questions or comments, I'm happy to take that now.
Yeah, so if you have any questions or comments, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Or you can even write in the chat box to me personally or to everybody. So if you have any questions or any comments, any anecdotes that you think would be helpful, that would be great if you could share it now.
Assalamu alaikum everyone.
Alaikum
salam.
Yeah, this is Sayyid Shah from India right now.
Oh, it's the middle of the night for you.
Yeah, it's 8 a.m. now.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
okay.
Nice.
Okay, ma'am. Thanks for hosting such a wonderful meeting. And I'd like to say that it's just an amazing. And whenever I saw your posts on Instagram, that I also requested you to put the registration address, but unfortunately, it's unable to copy and paste from Instagram.
I know so, that is a bit of an issue, and we will look into that, inshallah.
Yeah. Okay. So look into the issue. Anyway, thank you for such a meeting, and I would just my question is that whenever we are dealing with our parents, first of all, almost there is a generation gap. This causes the problem. Plus, the understanding level that we think and what they thought is totally different sometimes, and you will almost is totally different. So, whenever they do something that is not good for their health or not good for society and not good for their selves, when we trying to stop their things and they just overreacted on that and exaggerate things that do I do and ask question like that, do I do that things? I'm the boss. Yeah, I'm the boss. I'm your parents, not you. You are not my parents, and just like they overrating. So how to deal with such things?
Okay, that's a really good question. And if I understand you correctly, the question that you're asking is that, sometimes the roles are reversed, right? So when the youth are telling the parents that something's not good for you, and or something not good for the planet, perhaps, or politics, or in whatever situation, and very often we find that youth are much more conscious in that term, in terms of political awareness, in terms of the climate change and all of these things, right? And again, if you come back to it and the principles we discussed, right? So as adults, we can share our worldview, but we cannot impose it on another adult, right? So we can say things like, have you considered, or share it in a way that, what, I read this very interesting article, or I saw this on TV, and this is what they were saying. What do you think about that? What's your opinion? And, the idea again is that there will be disagreement. Just because it doesn't even have to be a generation gap, right? It doesn't have to be, it could be two people of the same age, but who think very differently, right? And when we're adults, when we're dealing with adults, we don't necessarily aim for agreement in every conversation. So if we can understand each other, that's the goal of the conversation, right? So, the idea is that if, how do we learn to understand? So I can share, what, I read this, or I heard about this, what are some of your thoughts? And if they say, yeah, I don't believe it. Oh, I think it's an exaggeration. Or I think it's a conspiracy theory and there's nothing such. Oh, interesting. So can you tell me more? Can you help me understand, where are you coming from? And the more you ask questions rather than come down with the fact that you're wrong and I'm right, the more luck you will have. Because again, think of it as not changing their mind. Because even in, like, with spouses, this happens all the time, right? With siblings, it happens all the time, that one person is very health conscious, only wants to eat healthy, and the other person is very into, and if you make a big deal about it, that no, it's only my way and I'm right, then it's much more likely to lead to more conflict, right? But if I say, yeah, I can see that you're maybe, but let's see. Let's just try and understand each other. If your goal is understanding, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the generation gap, because here's the thing, they don't understand you, but you don't understand them either. So again, taking the charge, how about you try to understand where they're coming from? And when you do that, automatically, you are both likely to come closer together than if you are both insist that, no, I'm right, and you're not looking at it my way. Does that make sense? So good luck.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So any other questions?
And I request to do one thing, that please put the materials of these sessions and all.
Yes, so inshallah, I think they will be posted.
Yeah, because it would be better for us, and we could go on more details. Okay.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'll make sure we do that. Okay, so I think we have time for maybe one more question. If anyone has a question or a comment they'd like to share, if you could do it over audio or video, that would be great. Or you're more than welcome to post it in the chat.
Assalamu alaikum.
I don't think, yeah, alaikum salam.
I have a quick question. I'm just gonna give you a scenario. Let's say two people are starting to get to know each other for marriage purposes. So the first step, they're really sensitive in terms of, like you have explained earlier, when you do X, situation Y, Z. So I'm giving a situation similar to that. So in that, the first steps of when you're getting to know somebody. So now, what are the steps to be extra cautious and be extra careful of how you should communicate with them so it doesn't create that kind of issue? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure I do. Are you talking about just agreeing on issues, or are you talking about
so let's say, let's say the person, the guy has a different thinking and the sister has a different thinking. So how do you balance that out by maintaining the mutual respect as well as not putting each other down by having expectations of what you want to do in life, or what you expect, what she expects, and you just want to balance it out by having a mutual respect. So my question is, how do you put expectation by not complaining, saying that, oh, I want you to do this, do that, do this. Instead of that, how do you make it more, you don't want to sound like you're complaining. You want to sound as like you want to have a healthy kind of expectation from each other. So from the beginning, everything is clear as glass. Yeah.
Everything can't be clear. Let me start.
That's the challenge.
Yes.
Okay.
So let me tell you a few realities about married life. Okay.
Thank you.
Everything cannot be clear from the very beginning. It cannot. You will disagree on many different things, sometimes completely, and you may not be able to come to the same page, right? Part of married life is learning to accept the other person as they are. So what I tell young people very often is, do not marry a project. What I mean by do not marry a project is that when you see someone and you think, okay, yeah, he has some potential or she has some potential, but here's all the things that I want to see different, and this is what I'm going to work on to change them. You are signing yourself up for a lifetime of upset, okay? Because people always change, but they change on their own agenda. They change how they want to. They do not change how you want them to change, right? When you see something that you do not like in somebody, you have two options. If you know that you cannot live with this and it is a very big deal for you, then do yourself and the other person a favor and do not get married to them. If you like them generally and there is a significant thing that you don't like about them, then you need to assume that it will always be there and you need to practice acceptance of it. It may change. The thing is, I'm not saying it will never change, but you cannot go into the marriage expecting that it will change, because it may not. I'm not sure if that is answering your question. And I know that probably sounds very hard for a lot of people to hear, right?
Yeah, I mean, no, unfortunately, the things I'm not married, so that's a good thing. But a lot of my friends who are dealing with this at this point, so they asked me personally to ask that question for you. So yeah, I will deliver the answer.
Marriage is like such a big topic, right? And what I would recommend is that people who are considering getting married or are confused about what is important and what is not important, I have a video on my Facebook page. It is called 5 Things to Consider Before You Say Yes. It is a very important video for everyone to watch because it gives you a very, I hope, clear idea on what things are important and what things are not important. So, what I'm finding that a lot of young people are very confused about what things are actually going to make them happy. So, for example, if you are, many people are focusing on things which have no predictive value in how happy your married life is going to be. Where do you live, how much money you make, what dress size you are, how tall you are. All of these things are not going to make you happy or unhappy. That's just the reality. Now, if you are so focused on them and that's what you want, and I don't mean you, I'm just talking generally, right? No problem. That it's, that's some work that we need to do on ourselves rather than try to find somebody who will fit, because we may find somebody who will tick all the boxes, but we will find that we get married to them, but we're not happy because that's not what makes people happy. So, what I'm really finding, which is really very distressing to me, is that people are chasing the wrong things. They're looking for, happiness in the wrong places. Yeah. And if you find somebody who has the same value system as you and who you generally like as a human being, that's a really good place to start. That's a really good place to begin a relationship. Does this mean that you will agree on everything? No. Does this mean that this person won't drive you crazy at times? No. But that's where you begin, and that's where the work of married life and the work of relationship begins. It doesn't end there, right?
And just to add, to grow with someone and basically learn together as a team. So I think that should be all about. And I just put the link here if anybody else wants to. I just looked it up on YouTube. So thank you so much, sister, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So I didn't even realize
Okay,
it.
perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so I think this is a good place to stop. I just want to say thank you to our organizers. Let's Connect Duanadwa group for always organizing these amazing virtual events for us during this time, and Sister Merzia for helping us with our mental health during this time. It's really helpful and really beneficial. We're gonna end with a short dua. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد صدق الله العلي العظيم. Thank you everyone, and have a good night, inshallah. Take care.
Take care.
God bless.
God bless.
God bless.
Hafiz.